The United States, really the Trump administration, and Iran are inching closer and closer towards war. This is a very scary and potentially devastating situation for the entire Middle East and potentially the entire global community. This is some serious shit. So Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard, two progressive icons, two professed non-interventionists, have both issued very strong and powerful statements regarding this. So check out what they have to say, and then we'll discuss.
Troops deployed. Secretary Pompeo momentarily is going to be speaking from CENTCOM. Iran is now threatening to break out of the nuclear deal for the first time after complying for 14 months, according to international inspectors, even though the president withdrew from it. So we see these hits on the tankers. They say there's intelligence. At least the Brits agree with the U.S. that this was Iranian-based or Iranian-proxied. You know, there could be an accidental war. What do you do if you're the commander-in-chief, Bernie Sanders? You're President Sanders. What do you do right now where Iran is arguably acting aggressively, even if it's in reaction to the U.S. policymaking?
First of all, just a couple of points, Andrea. First of all, what is absolutely necessary is an objective investigation as to these incidents. The destruction or the bombing or the attacking of oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman is not acceptable, and we need to investigate it. Second of all,
you don't accept what the Secretary, let me just ask, you don't accept the declaration from the Secretary of State?
No, but here's the main point that I want to make. If you look at the recent history of this country, I think we understand that the two worst foreign policy disasters were based on lies that came from the White House. You remember the so-called Gulf of Tonkin incident that led us to increase military involvement in Vietnam. And man, I could speak, that was my generation. 59,000 brave young men never came home from that war, and tens of thousands of more died, committed suicide, got into drugs when they came home. That was based on a lie. And then you look more recently at the war in Iraq, which I vigorously opposed because I did not believe Cheney, and I did not believe John Bolton, and I did not believe the Bush administration, again, based on a lie that Saddam Hussein in Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. Let me just say this. I will do everything that I personally can as a United States Senator to stop the United States attacking Iran. If we go into a war with Iran, this will be an asymmetrical war which will go on and on and on. There will be never-ending wars in the Middle East. It'll make the war in Iraq look like a cakewalk. So we have got to do everything we can to bring the antagonist, Saudi Arabia, which is a brutal dictatorship, together with Iran. Bring them together, use the power of the United States to work out a diplomatic solution.
The situation with Iran. This president has designated, for the first time in history, the military of another country as a terrorist organization. How dangerous that is, what a dangerous precedent that sets. Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, literally said, when asked, so you're saying that the head of Iran's military should be treated the same as ISIS? He said yes. That is a direct abuse of constitutional power, a constitutional power that lies within Congress to make the decision to declare war or not. So I've introduced legislation to deal with some of these kinds of abuses called the No More Presidential Wars Act. And this legislation would make it an impeachable offense for any president to bypass Congress and to unilaterally go and start waging a war in another country.
That was amazing. That was beautiful. At least as beautiful as it can get when you're dealing with a situation like this. Because it's so satisfying to hear two people perfectly grasp the gravity of a situation like this, and also grasp just how we get ourselves out of this cycle of violence and destruction that we've engaged ourselves in across the globe, not just in the Middle East. So first, I love Tulsi's proposed No More Presidential Wars plan. I think that's what it's called. That's a beautiful idea. And it gets to one of the roots of the problem, which is that the executive branch over the past few administrations have overextended themselves right? You saw Obama, you saw Bush, all doing the same thing, whether it be through enhanced interrogation tactics, whether it be through drone strikes, and then whether it be now through Trump's unilateral decisions to engage in conflicts across the globe, and then of course now this decision to try to unilaterally create war with Iran. So again, I feel like this is the necessary legislation that we would need in order to curtail all of that nonsense. Again, it attacks one of the roots of the problem. But there are so many other roots of the problem, and I think Bernie was able to touch on that a little bit more. When you're talking about a government, a broken system that is addicted to war in the Middle East. And again, we've seen these lies. The United States just throw out these lies, blatant lies. Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. I don't know where they are. I don't know if they exist, but I'll tell you what. He's just a bad guy. He has something to do with 9/11. Just lying to the American people. You saw LBJ. You saw JFK lying to the American people, right? To get us involved in, as Bernie said, two of the worst foreign policy blunders that we have seen in modern history, right? And history continues to repeat itself as America goes on in its history of being this ultra-capitalist power who claims they're fighting for democracy, but in reality has created more enemies than it really has destroyed. And that's the root of the problem. It's a broken system where we are simply addicted to making our companies money. That's the only reason. That the war machine is incredibly profitable. And if you don't see the link between that, when you don't see that Dick Cheney was the former CEO or some shit of Halliburton, when you don't see the links within the administrations, when you don't see that after these wars, the oil companies and military companies routinely make billions in profit, when you don't see the link between that and why we are addicted to war, then you're naive and you don't truly grasp how deep this situation is. We are addicted to endless war because it makes us money. We plunder, we scourge these countries so that we can take control, we can take their resources and bring it on back home to our elite few who run our political system. That's all it is. That's all it's ever been. And it's a disgusting system that must end. We waste trillions of dollars engaging in wars like this. And here's the deal. They are literally drafting up this war out of thin air. Out of thin air. So they go to the media and Trump says, hey, I mean, Iran is, they're enriching a little too much. They're engaging in terrorist activities. That Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, yeah, they're engaging in terrorist activities. This is a dangerous, the Iranians, they're a threat. So we're going to impose sanctions on you because you're violating some mystical agreement that the IAEA, the regulatory agency responsible for seeing if they're actually violating it, routinely says, no, they're not violating it. But we lie anyway, impose sanctions, cripple their economy, and now we're here. They created this conflict, all these tensions out of thin air. Why? Because somewhere down the road, somebody's going to make a shit ton of money. That's all it ever is. That's all it ever is. So let me tell you this, man. As Bernie said there, as Tulsi has alluded to there, and as we've all been saying for the past few decades, it is time to fix this broken system, right? That's the root of the problem, man. It's that they are making money off the slaughter of thousands of innocent people, making money off the chaos going on in these regions. They plunder, they scourge, they create chaos, and they leave. And it's a vacuum of continuous money-making machines for the U.S. government. You go in there, right, in the Gulf War, you fuck it all up. And then what? Here we come with Saddam Hussein, here we come with the Iraq War, here we come with the nonsense, right? We take his ass out, here comes ISIS. We go in there, we scourge, we create nonsense. We go in there in Iran in 53, we create nonsense, and all of a sudden the Shah comes to power. We continue to create nonsense, and now all of a sudden we're here. It's a cycle, and it does not stop. It does not stop, and people don't understand that, right? They feed into the propaganda that, oh, this is about democracy. This is about ensuring the freedom of people. This is not about freedom. This is some Captain America Marvel nonsense. This is real life. They are lying to you. They are making conflict up out of thin air. And it's not just dangerous. It's wasting our resources. These are trillions of dollars that could potentially not be spent on furthering the ultra-capitalist machine and maybe towards rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. Medicare for all, being spent on a Green New Deal program, right? Creating millions of jobs for lower-income communities. But instead, what? They're spent on the war machine that kicks constantly and does not stop churning out violence and destruction and chaos. This is the system. And it has to stop, man. This has to be the end of the line right here in 2020. But this will just continue on for decades upon decades. So, man, that's American foreign policy. And this is just the latest episode in the nonsense. I don't know when it's going to stop, but I do know that if you elect a person like Bernie Sanders or Tulsi Gabbard, if you put people like that in power in our Congress, in the presidency, and across local and state governments, what you're going to be seeing is a well-functioning America where we don't go over and plunder the world's most vulnerable countries, and instead we represent what we've always dreamed that we were: democracy, freedom, the beacon of hope and security. But this is not the America that we currently are, where we are literally creating conflict with the country out of thin air like a wizard. It's incredible, man.